we're a commercial proposition, so we've got to make money. The females in Boston are very enthusiastic, kind of over-engineer things, and then things almost get crushed before they even have a chance to.
Hey there, cricket lovers. Welcome back to another episode of The Reverse Scoop. Today, we're discussing U.S. youth cricket, and we have a guest with us. His name is Hadley Slade Jones. He's been part of the U.S. Cricket Youth Volunteer Setup. He's been part of New Milford Cricket Club for the last 2 years. He's our shining star in the back end, as I like to call him, and I want to bring him on to discuss U.S. Cricket youth programs and give you guys some insights into how you guys can get involved. So I have joining me Hadley Slade Jones. Thank you so much for joining me, brother. How are you doing?
Hey Nabil, yeah, good to be here. I'm always excited to chat all things youth cricket and USA cricket. So it's going to be fun.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely, it's good to have you on. So let's give viewers a little bit of a background, Hadley, if you don't mind telling viewers a little bit about your last couple of years with New Milford Cricket and how you've been part of the youth development programs through the U.S. Cricket Pathways. Just a bit of insight to start off.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably worth noting that I don't have a cricket background. I didn't grow up playing cricket other than a little bit of, tennis ball cricket in New Zealand, but I didn't come up through cricket clubs. I never played hardball cricket or kind of Saturday cricket. So my introduction to cricket really was through my kids' enjoyment of cricket, and they oddly, maybe, really got into cricket when we moved from Australia to Connecticut. Found the New Milford Club and yourself and Jay. So that's sort of really where my kind of involvement in cricket came from, and that was an education for me, right? Because if the kids wanted to do something, I had to go out and learn about it, and I was spending so much time driving them to nets, sitting on the sides of fields. I thought, well, I might as well find a way to get involved, so I'm not wasting my time, but also to help other people, because clearly cricket takes a lot of kind of setting up and a lot of logistics and administration. So that's kind of how I got into the game. Really was through supporting the kids.
Wow, yeah. I mean, when Izzy and Ollie came onto the scene, right, and they both very talented right off the bat. So were the kids, involved in cricket in Australia or New Zealand, or they just picked it up here within the US clubs?
Yeah, no, they played. So they played cricket in New Zealand when they started playing cricket in New Zealand when they were about kind of 5. That was just sort of what you do in New Zealand when you're a little kid, and it's a form of cricket we call Kiwi cricket. It's plastic bats and balls. It's fast and furious. You get out, you lose, I think, 5 runs. Everyone faces maybe 10, 20 balls, and it's just chaos, right? Just organized chaos. So that's a real good laugh. And then when the kids were about 7, I suppose we moved to Australia. So same thing, wanted to find a cricket club. At that stage, because they were just a little bit older, the shape of cricket was a little more traditional, if you like. One of the things they do in Australia is they introduce the kids to the hard ball very quickly so that they are very comfortable with it and don't kind of develop a fear of the hard ball and things like that. And we were very lucky to have a terrific cricket coach in Australia for the kids. He just happened to be working at the club that the kids went to. And he's very recently been the batting coach of Bangladesh. And I was a little bit worried because he's one of the, professional cricket player, often considered the best cricket player in Australia to not play for Australia. So holds lots of domestic batting records and things like this. And I sort of thought, oh no, this is going to be a little bit technical, if you like, the coaching. But he was all about kids, just come in and just smash the ball, bowl the ball as fast as you can. We're going to move the game as fast as you can. We're not going to mess around too much with the precision of the game, whether it was a no ball or not, or a boundary or not. It's just fast and furious, one and done. And that was great for the kids, because the kids just want to come in and smash runs and, see the ball, hit the ball. The parents don't want to, spend all day with games being elongated because of wides and extras, or where's my kid run out or not run out. No one cares, as long as everyone's got a good attitude. Let's just move on and we'll see you next week, So definitely a little bit of a background in cricket. Probably a slightly different vibe about cricket in New Zealand and Australia as a kid. Obviously, it's a primary summer sport, but the approach, I would say, is much more carefree in terms of cricket. There's much less focus on technical cricket at that young age. It's much more about having fun swinging the bat and throwing the ball, and kind of an early focus on learning the game. And I mean the whole game, like fielding and running between wickets and coming in and giving your mates a high five and all those little kind of softer skills, I think, that teach you gamesmanship and how to understand how a game is kind of ebbing and flowing. There's a bit more of a focus on that and in fielding, because I don't know how long you spend fielding when you're playing a game of cricket, but it's probably 80-90% of your time, right? Depending on your other roles in the game. The difference between winning and losing, and actually that can just be putting in the discipline around fielding, right? And fitness. And it doesn't really require talent. That's effort and attitude, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, and you brought up like New Zealand having obviously a different approach to their youth cricket, and then Australia having a different approach, and it depends on the values, right, of the countries and how you're
Yeah.
brought up. So I want to kind of bring that into now the US setup, right? Like you've been here last couple of years, Hadley. You've seen, what type of values are here within cricket. Do you see any type of approach that can be applied within the system here to better, the growth at the grassroots level for cricket, or like from a values perspective,
Yeah.
because you obviously said Australia is like, fast paced, and New Zealand's a bit carefree, they kind of have kids. So those approaches work within those systems. Do you see anything that pop off in your head, thinking about US cricket and youth development
Yeah. I
here?
mean, US cricket is tricky, right? Because one, the geography of the US presents its challenges, right? Like in the sheer sort of scale of the infrastructure. And I'm talking about the human kind of infrastructure and how do you create a consistent kind of syllabus. One of the things I didn't mention, but in New Zealand, and I think probably in Australia, every 5-year-old cricket player is learning the same things no matter where they are in the country. And every 6-year-old is learning the same things because there are national sort of curriculums and aids to support the kids, and then the coaches can go on coaching courses, so they're all learning the same things and how to coach and all that kind of thing. So America is very different, right? Because it is much more unstructured, less established at the grassroots level. And I think you do get, to your point, very different values based on whoever's running the setup, right? Which is not unreasonable.
Yeah.
The big difference for me that I saw in the US, and I think New Milford Cricket was probably an exception, and I say that because I'm conscious America is so big, you don't know what you don't know. But being a true not-for-profit, as opposed to the more sort of professional kind of academy setup. And I think the challenge with the academy setups is academies charge amounts of money that are material to the people that are paying that, to parents or whatever. And so, of course, to justify that, they have to offer certain levels of opportunities, but also certain levels of performance, because you're now competing for the money from one academy to another academy, right? If as a parent, where am I going to go? I'm going to go to the one that's winning a whole lot, or the one that's more popular, or whatever. So the money creates different sorts of incentives, I think. Whereas what I saw in New Zealand and Australia, those incentives sort of don't exist, because you're paying a bit of money, right? You've got to pay for a bit of gear and maybe a bit of ground usage or something. But you're not really doing anything more than a donation. There's not really the same level of kind of competition for the parents' money and to try and attract kids. You just go to the club that's convenient because it's down the road from you. And that sort of allows the focus, I think, to be a little bit more on growing the game of cricket rather than worrying about individual players' performance. And you can just let people have fun, and you can sort of take an attitude that says, let's just attract as many people to the game as possible. And I don't care which club you play for, right? And we want to keep you involved for as long as possible by having fun. And it's got to be fun for you, and it's got to be fun for your parents, right? So that means things on the sidelines of the games and whatever. And you have a bit of faith that the cream will kind of rise to the top, and you don't really worry about performance until a little bit later in the kids' kind of development cycle. And then you can identify those kids a little bit and wrap some different, opportunities and intensity of coaching and things around them. But the reality is, I don't know, 1% of participants in amateur sports go on to be sort of professional. So I think the best thing we can do is use sports as a platform to teach kids life skills and give them opportunities. Opportunities to tour and have fun, opportunities to make friends. Know you can walk into a cricket club anywhere in the world and you'll be embraced and be able to play a social game of cricket, right? Whereas I think the academy structure is a little more focused on performance, and people are paying money, so you sort of expect something, right? So not unreasonable, just different.
Yeah, absolutely. And I totally agree there. I mean, it's the approach, obviously, right? That even will get people involved within the setup. I mean, nobody would bring a kid to an academy if you're asking for, money up front to train somebody and to teach a new
Yeah, that's right.
sport. So for us, it's all about the growth and really just growing the game and introducing it out to newer and newer audiences so they get a chance to try as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's the key. Like, there's enough expats in the US that cricket will always have a bit of a base, right? There's enough of us from cricket playing nations, but how do you begin to attract people who are from places that are traditionally not cricket playing nations, whether they'd normally be playing baseball or something else? How do you get them involved in cricket? Either is something that is supplementary to the baseball and supportive of it, or whatever else they do, or as a genuine alternative. I think that's a real challenge for cricket.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we know that, there's funding obviously required to put structuring in place for US cricket. And how do we get that funding? And obviously, another question with that is, the opportunities, like people that want to get involved in the game, right? Again, they want to make logical choices. So they want to be able to see opportunities in front of them that, hey, in 5 years, I can get to this level because I see a pathway in front of me defined, as it would be in baseball or in NFL or in basketball through college sports or whatnot. I mean, so we have a system that's in front of us within the sporting, realm here. Do you think that can be applied into cricket? I know college
Yeah,
cricket already exists, but again, it's at a very small level. Like, how do we kind of go about that within the US
yeah. I
approach? Because I
mean,
think those are the
I
values that
look.
are here.
I don't pretend to have the answers, right? But I certainly think about these things a little bit, and having been involved in the setup. So I mean, the first thing is, like, it's quite easy to criticize USA cricket, and probably at some point during this conversation, I myself will criticize USA cricket because, like any of us or any organization, they're not perfect. But in the last 3 or 4 years that I've been involved, I've seen a huge amount of development in terms of under 19s, under 15s. I'm talking about male and female pathways culminating in regional teams and national tournaments and things. And that wasn't there a few years ago. So there's definitely a level of structure and kind of rigor and discipline that's coming in through the introduction of pathways. I think at this stage there's probably a high degree of variability across the country about how those pathways are kind of applied. How do you make it into those teams, and how does the selection process work? My personal view is there could probably be a little bit more transparency around that. Not because you're trying to please everybody, because I think plenty of people who don't get selected for appropriate reasons will always feel sort of hard done by. But I kind of think if you want people to get good at things and hit certain targets, why don't you publicize what those things are and then make sure everyone is working towards these things, rather than, in some cases, I think the selection process itself has been a little bit serious to the participants, even if it's been reasonably quantitative behind the scenes in terms of fitness and performance measures and so on and so forth. So I think it's getting better. I think there's some structure. Money and resources are important, but if I look at somewhere like New Zealand cricket, I think, probably has less money than a county cricket club in the UK, and still does okay on the international scene. So I don't think money is everything. I think it's helpful, but I would always question, are we making the most of the resources we've got? What can we do with kind of efficient kind of use of a volunteer workforce? I mean, I think, New Milford's a good example, right, of working with local authorities. The town, the mayor's phenomenal. The town is wonderfully supportive. So there are other ways of getting sort of resources and access to things and providing opportunities, I think, rather than worrying too much about what an official organisation like USA Cricket may or may not be able to do on a kind of a national scale.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. I mean, we have to take the initiatives, right, to better what we can with the minimal resources, as you said. So, and you obviously brought up U.S. youth cricket, right? So, I want to kind of get into that, Headley, about how people can get involved within the setup, right? Because I'm sure there are people sitting at home that may want to get involved either by donating to a club or by giving their time to a certain youth level program. So can you explain to a little bit about if people that wanting to get involved in youth programs as volunteers or within the setup, how can they approach that or how can they do that? Or who can they reach
Yeah.
out to perhaps?
Yeah. So how I got involved was through a little bit of detective work when I first arrived in the States, right? So, I followed USA Cricket on Facebook. I found some USA Cricket people on LinkedIn and kind of reached out. As I said, it's kind of evolved and got a lot better in the last few years. So USA Cricket does make regular calls for sort of official USA Cricket volunteers. So Jamie Lloyd is the USA Cricket Youth sort of national coordinator. The guy's I just think the guy's a diamond in amongst all the things that are happening in cricket. The challenge that I've seen with the volunteer system, and I think the volunteer system is an absolute must. I think you have to appreciate that as a volunteer, you actually have to do things. There's actually real work that gets done. It's not sort of I've got this badge and I get invited to a few calls and I'm all care and no responsibility. There's actually real work to organize people, organize resources, put on events, deal with parents, deal with players. So it's not, it's an honest kind of role, if that makes sense. The other challenge with being a USA Cricket volunteer, and I think this is a challenge for people personally times, but also for USA Cricket, is you cannot be self-interested. You have to be interested in growing the game of cricket, in this case, the youth and grassroots piece of cricket, right? And that may come at the expense of your club or your academy. You are not there representing your club, your academy. You are representing USA Cricket in the region that you're assigned to, the northeast or the west or whatever it might be, right? And that's a very different hat, particularly if you're out of a commercial setup, right? Because you may need to act not in the interests or in your own commercial interests or the commercial interests of your club. And that's not easy, right? So it's not always easy to find those people. Not everyone, quite understandably, not everyone wants to do that.
Yeah, how many people do you think actually understand that in the system? Because I don't think a lot of them do. They obviously do things for their own. That's what I've noticed within the last 20 years of being part of this cricket, right? So do you think they understand what you just explained, about really having that, we got to do things for USA Cricket and not really look for benefits on the back end with our affiliates or whoever that we may be a part with?
Oh,
'Cause I've
yeah.
seen that happen.
I don't have the history that you have in being involved in cricket in the States, right? So I can only talk about the last few years. What I would say is USA Cricket are very deliberate about that as part of their kind of selection process for volunteers. So that it is a conscious kind of screen that they do. And when I think about the volunteers that I've worked with in the sort of the northeast and a little bit further south around sort of the DC, Virginia area, I've got to say that the vast majority of people have the heart in the right place and put a lot of time and effort into the right things. Is everybody behaving, in the way that we'd like people to behave? Probably not, because we're people, right? But I think USA Cricket does a very reasonable job of trying to screen for it. I think the more within the volunteer structure, there are seniority of volunteers, if you like, and certainly the more sort of senior volunteers that kind of head up a region and things. I think their head is absolutely in the right place about trying to grow the game for the region. So yeah, I think it's not easy. It's going to take time, And one of the challenges, I think, just in the few years that I was in the States, I lost count of how many kind of USA Cricket sort of CEOs came and went, and then there was periods with no leadership, and then they're lurching from Chapter 11 to Chapter 11, and then you hear, someone's getting a golden handshake and the players aren't getting paid. So there's quite a lot of sort of instability at the top. That's not easy when you're down actually at the coalface, facing parents and facing players on a sort of not a daily but a routine sort of basis. In the organisation you represent itself is a little bit chaotic and uncertain as well. So it's a tough thing to do. It's not easy.
No, very, very tough. And yeah, these changes at the management level, we see it, and the vision itself, I'm sure it changes based on the management that comes in, because obviously they bring their own agendas, right? When they come into power and they want to achieve something to a certain degree within their realm that they can do. So let's talk about women's cricket, as
Yeah.
we get into that, because I know recent management that have come in, they've put a heavy focus on women's cricket and the growth of fostering women's game here. Do you think there's a big potential here, Headley, in the US for the growth of US cricket game in particular?
Yeah, I mean, my observation is that the female game in the US, in terms of the structure and the pathways, is a little bit more mature than what I saw on the youth and the kind of the young adult kind of male side. So I think in some respects, right, it's a little bit like looking into the future. If you're a male, and you go, okay, they can get kind of organised and produce, under 19 teams and go and compete and so on and so forth. So I think it's a little bit more organised, and the execution is a little bit kind of cleaner because they've been at it just maybe a year or two longer. I don't know officially. I'm told, I've read by the likes of like Peter Della Penna, I think, sort of says there's about 300 female cricketers playing cricket in the US. So it's a significantly more manageable number of players. So in terms of creating structures and pathways, that becomes relatively straightforward. The real challenge is, how do you go from 300 players to 3,000 players? Whereas I think in the male side, the issue is probably you've got loads of players, but how do you fit them into a structure and a process to start to create a bit of organisation? So I think that the female cricket has a different challenge.
Essentially, the growth, as you said, 300 right now. How do we get to 3,000? The interest of the game, I mean, we've seen it build here in our small community of New Milford, right? Within the female setup. And I think it's really more about the initiatives of the clubs themselves, of having to put out, teams and supporting women's cricket, youth cricket, to highlight these things. Because sometimes I feel like, even if we can go to like Bridgeport, for example, I'm sure if they decided to create a team for a female, they would have enough people and interest there to have a team. But again, it's not like communicated properly or not thought about, through it. So do you think it's something that clubs should think about as well, from a league's perspective, to try and support, women's and youth cricket, to build the
Yeah,
interest within our cities?
100%. But it comes back, I think, to someone has to want to do it. When I
Yeah.
when I think about the kind of the men's cricket in Connecticut, right? I think of it as a little bit of it's a bit like a social club, right? You get together, you might have a few drinks, you have some meals, you hang out, you have a good time, and you play a bit of cricket, right? And there's a lot of administration that goes into the kind of the league and setting up the different, the T20s and the T40s and all that kind of thing. So there's a lot of time and effort going into it, but there's not really many people sitting around going, hey, let's create the female league, let's create the youth league and grow the game. And until someone actually wants to do that, it's not just going to happen sort of organically, I don't think, But we saw it at New Milford, right? We pretty quickly created a squad of around about 23, 25 female players. Now that's across all kind of ages, so that we could create a team. Mad Dogs have a bunch of female players and do some quite organised things. It just takes some effort. It takes a bit of horsepower, unfortunately, to build the momentum, and then it becomes a bit easier, right? The females in Boston are very enthusiastic and occasionally came down and played with us and so on in Connecticut. So there's actually a base there to work with, but someone has to really put some time, effort, and energy into doing something with it in order for something to really sort of take off. And I think to some extent, a mandate from USA Cricket might be kind of interesting if there was a USA female cricket volunteer, that was tasked with saying, hey, if they went to each region and said, hey, we want you to create an additional 50 female players in each region, well, overnight you would sort of double the number of females playing cricket
Yeah.
in the US. Do you know what I mean? And New Milford produced 25 in one season. So I don't think that would be a big ask numerically to do it, but if the administration's not there to do it, some hardcore volunteer, it won't happen.
First, it's got to get into their agendas, then it's got to have the execution. So too many hurdles to go through for these types of things to actually take place, but obviously initiatives is the first start, where each club and the support that the communities can provide is essentially becoming part of these clubs, and bringing your kids to the communities and making them part of the club. That's a starting point. Headley, is that right? Is that probably the best way for people to support this type
Yeah,
of a process to begin with?
I think that's right, and the answer is it's probably not one thing or the other, right? It's probably 5 or 6, 7 small things that kind of spark and start a bit of a bushfire. There's no reason in my mind why we couldn't, during league games in Connecticut, just be doing some fun stuff with kids or even adult females who are just interested to be in the game. Just do something on the side. Do you know what I mean? There's no reason why we couldn't be doing something with all youth in schools, right? And picking up females that way. Someone just has to do it. Someone has to have the time to do it, right? And the desire to do it. But I know from conversations with schools and things, they don't have a problem. USA Cricket certainly is happy to support it. And it's happening in parts of the country. That's probably the other thing, Nabil, is what's working in other parts of the country and what's working with other clubs and what can be transported around the country. And what have people tried and found not to be worth the time, effort, and energy? And was that because they did a bad job of kind of executing the thing? Or is it truly a thing that's not really worth doing for some reason? So there's probably a little bit of learning from across different parts of the country as well.
That's one of the goals here for the podcast, is to really information share through people and tell people about our success here at New Milford, so they can at least get what they can from us, and maybe start to get into their offices and start a youth rep program. So these types of things, it takes communicating and sharing information, and then them applying it themselves across the board, as you said. It's critical
Yeah.
for us to do, because again, it can save us a lot of time and hassle of trying to learn and relearn. So if there's already things being done that's working, we should be able to highlight it, put it out on the platform, and we can apply it within our structures. So that's absolutely
Yeah.
a key thing there. So
With the Major League Cricket that happened, which I had no involvement in other than as a spectator who loved the spectacle, right? Take Connecticut, you've got the Mumbai sort of franchise, notionally based just next door. How is that being leveraged? How is the Cricket World Cup T20 2024 being leveraged to generate a bit of excitement and create some little opportunities and things like that? So there are definitely things that I think that are probably could be exploited or leveraged more than they are to benefit the growth of the game.
yeah, I mean, for now, I think they're just relying on the IPL money to really kind of come in and expand as much as they can, right? Because obviously, when so much money is at stake and involved, they're going to want to make sure that it takes off and it's successful. And they're going to have probably a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan for the major league, to see how it's going to actually pan out and grow the game here. And even discussing that aspect of it, we haven't seen a lot of local players get chances within that league setup. Mostly it's been international stars that have come in to kind of spark the interest of the league itself, as well as other
Yeah.
cricketers, but very few. I think a handful of U.S. cricketers were able to get in any sort of playing 11s within the major league game. So Do you think there's probably something that needs to be done there? Maybe getting more local players involved here within those teams?
It's interesting. I would draw a parallel with the professional rugby tournament that happens in the US, right? So rugby, a bit like cricket, is obviously a minority sport. It's growing quite fast, and it's trying to find its kind of place in the US kind of sporting market. So it's got a lot of the different game, but a lot of the same kind of challenges. Um, but the professional rugby tournament's been running for probably 3 or 4 seasons now. So again, it's just a little bit ahead of the major league stuff. And I spoke. I got involved in that a little bit because I coach kids rugby in the States as well, right? And so I went to the New York professional team, and they were very. They were incredibly giving, as was the Boston team, about coming down into Connecticut and working with kids and things. And I sort of said, why do you do this? And they said, well, we're a commercial proposition, so we've got to make money. So first and foremost, we have to put on a good product that sells tickets and sells jerseys. And initially, just like what you're saying with the cricket, we did that by bringing in a whole host of international stars, right? Our job is not to foster talent to produce a national rugby team for the US or to produce a national cricket team for you. That's not the point of Major League Cricket, right? They're not USA Cricket. They're a commercial opportunity, right? But after a couple of years, what the rugby clubs seem to have discovered is it actually makes commercial sense to start growing your own talent, start running academies and finding those diamonds in a rough and bringing them on, because they're ultimately much cheaper than international players, right? And they bring with them a level of a support base if they come from a particular college or a particular town or something else. So what I saw in the rugby was over a few years, and I'm talking only 3 or 4 or 5 years, you went from stacked with kind of international players to we want some international players, but actually they're now more in a mentoring and coaching role. And we want to start growing our own players because commercially that makes sense for us, not because we're trying to make USA better at particular sport, rugby or cricket. So the commercial model still has to work, but that's how it evolved in rugby. And I would imagine that's how it could evolve in cricket as well. And I would have thought, right, like statistically, if it's not difficult, let's just take the Mumbai New York team. If it's not difficult to get your hands on 1,000 players across New York, maybe you'll turn up a freak. Maybe you'll turn up, a 90-mile bowler. Maybe you'll turn up a freak, and actually that might be money well spent. So there's probably a model where that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I agree. I mean, but the actual problem again that they're going to want to face is, right, again, investment within the grassroots level for them to have, again, some type of a farm system that makes players and spits out players, how kind of like India or even like other countries, they are able to have such successful IPL events because they have such a vast domestic setup, right? And
Yeah,
ours
but what
domestic
would it?
setup here is essentially non-existent. So it still requires investment. So maybe for in the long run for them, is it going to outweigh the spend that it might take to create that system, or they're just going to want to make sure that, hey, we're at least making X percent of 10% profits each year, as long as we're okay with it. We're not have to spend anything extra. So do you think they're, as you said, they're not going to really worry about USA Cricket, right? Like what we want for them, it's more about saving expenses and getting more profits in over a long period of time and executing on obviously putting out a good product. How do they balance
Yeah,
that? I mean, I'm
I
sure
mean,
I mean, do you think they're going to want to put money into the system?
yeah, I just don't believe those two things are mutually exclusive. I just think there's probably a right way to do it and a wrong way to do it.
Yeah.
And there's probably a timing element to it as well, right? Because I would imagine, right, that the real money in these teams playing in the States isn't about eyes. It's about international gambling, and it's about an international TV audience, right? Like, or whether a few thousand people turn up to a stadium or not is probably not kind of not a massive deal to them. I would imagine, right? So I think they're going to have to find a commercial model where that all makes sense. But you know, I don't think it's impossible if you want to be a club that is internationally relevant. Like, I believe, I may not be right about this, but I believe it might be a part of the Rajasthan kind of strategy to sort of say, well, look, we're in the scheme of IPL teams in India, we're not going to be one of the biggest, but we can have a really big brand outside of India through community events and having outposts dotted around and so on and so forth. So yeah, I think, look, I just think the commercial model has to make sense, but I don't see why it can't.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a great conversation so far. One thing I did want to bring up was again regarding not youth cricket, women's cricket, where I've seen a lot of co-ed
Yeah,
leagues in a lot of different sports. For example, I play racquetball. So there's a lot of co-ed tournaments that happen, within the racquetball world, for example. So do you think that's something that can be leveraged?
yep.
Maybe starting a smaller league of like men and women combined cricket on a Saturday, play 15 over game or 20 over game, just as a starting point,
Yeah,
even with 3 or 4 teams.
yeah. So two things. The first, your comment about playing racquetball. I firmly believe it's a personal thing, but I think the data supports it. I firmly believe that at the youth level, kids need to be multi-sport athletes, right? And when I look at some of the better youth female players, they're swimming, they're doing gymnastics, they're playing softball, they're playing field hockey. So just the first point, I know it's not really the point of your question, but I think the first point is I would hate to think that people think cricket is everything and they have to play cricket all day, every day, when they should just be having fun, and there's benefits in terms of health and performance to doing lots of different types of movement and games, right? Your
Yeah.
point about co-ed reminds me of a point when Sean Sygett, Joe Root's old batting coach, came out and spent a little bit of time at New Milford. He said to me his belief was, in the game of cricket, you really only get as good as the level of talent that you're exposed to and the level that you're playing to. So his philosophy was, as long as it's safe and sort of fun, you got to break out of any notion of kind of age group or gender-based games as soon as possible. And you just have to play at the highest level you can, even if you're not successful, because you'll become successful over time. He had a number of examples out of Australia where a number of the sort of successful Australian batters in particular that we're familiar with don't come from the big cities. They come from the countryside. And when they're 12 and 13, that just means they're playing with the local men's team, just like our green wave concept in New Milford. And then they can easily fit into an under 19 team, an under 21 team, because they've been playing with 25, 30-year-old fast bowlers already, and it's almost like a step down. I think what's important is that people are having fun doing whatever they're doing, because then you tend to stick at it, and if you're having fun, you tend to get better at it. And I think fundamentally, we shouldn't assume that females only want to play with other females or are only capable of playing with other females. It's not really a game where physical size or something matters, like a game of American football or rugby. Just play cricket. My view is we should be blind to anything other than sort of ability and comfort.
Again, we gotta support this thing though, right? Like we gotta get a league going that actually says, hey, we're
Yeah.
supporting this as, trying to get women involved into the game. Cause obviously right now we have our league that plays, from a competitive, and all women can come and play, in those games. We've had I think West Indies players, women's players come in and play for Bridgeport in the past and
Yep.
smacked like other teams, right? So I think to show our support, we should have a league set up, a very small, but that incentivizes or gives reasons to other clubs to start to focus a little bit there, because if they're
Yeah.
not going to have anything to focus on, then we're not going to really have anything to do really. So
Yeah, I agree, and I think that the trick for me is probably to not be too kind of officious about it. Like, you just want to get some people together and play a bit of street cricket, right? I mean, just whack a tennis
yeah,
ball around. Don't worry about it too much. You know what I mean? You sort of get started by getting started, and sometimes I think in cricket we kind of over engineer things, and then things almost get crushed before they even have a chance to kind of go. So New Milford's got a bunch of females. We know Boston's got a bunch of females. Mad Dogs have a bunch of females. What can happen? Like who out of those setups? Who out of all of those three groups that I mentioned? And it might be one or two or three people, but want to to do something, and then who from the clubs that have some resources, and by resources I'm fields, nets, whatever, kind of wants to help enable something and just have a little long weekend festival in the middle of summer and have a bit of barbecue and a bit of cricket on the side. What the hell?
That's a great idea, man. I think definitely something to think about for this coming season. Again, Hadley, it's been a great conversation. If you guys are joining us right now, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. We've discussed youth cricket. We've discussed, volunteering for US cricket. We've discussed a lot of different things along community involvement, how to get involved with Hadley Slade Jones, fostering women's cricket, youth cricket, higher levels of pathways. So again, Hadley, any last personal, I know your family's moving back to New Zealand soon, right? So any future aspirations for Izzy and for Ollie for their cricketing journeys, or anything else you want to bring up to finish this conversation off, brother?
Yeah, so the kids are back in New Zealand now. Which is, look, I don't. Is it right for a dad to say he doesn't have aspirations for his kids? It probably sounds a bit weird, doesn't it? But I just want the kids to have fun. Do you know what I mean? Talent takes you so far. Hard work gets you the rest of the way, and with a little bit of luck. So I just like to think that cricket and the cricket family has a part to play in the kids' life wherever they go for a healthy sort of social life, right? Whatever kind of level they choose to play at while they still enjoy it, So that's what I sort of say on that. But look, thanks for having me on, Nabil, and thanks for all you're doing to kind of spread the word a little bit about cricket. And look, anyone who wants to volunteer, reach out to USA Cricket, reach out to your local volunteers. Personally rewarding, but boy, there's a lot of work to do. There's a lot of stuff to do. So get in the mix.
Absolutely, man. And you heard it from Headley, reach out to USA Cricket, reach out to local volunteers and get involved. We're all about, again, youth development, youth cricket development here on the channel, guys. So again, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit that bell icon for more updates. Again, Headley, we wish you all the best in everything you do for your family in New Zealand. Again, if there's anything that we can ever do from here, always just a call away, brother. So thanks again for joining me for this wonderful conversation. Yeah, to the viewers, guys, thank you so much. We'll catch you guys next time. Nabil Khan and Headley signing off from here.